let's continue with our next speaker. It's Bradley Gabr-Ryn from Cambridge. Unfortunately, Bradley couldn't join us today, but he was so kind to record his speech for WUDMilan. So Bradley is currently a design lead at MetaLab and also the founder of COAS, a product design studio focused on mental health and design ethics. So just to introduce his talk, digital products are notorious for capturing our attention, but we're becoming increasingly aware of the darker side of technology, as well as the impact it can have on our mental health. So how can we design with mental health in mind? And Bradley will share his thoughts on in his speech.
Hey friends, I am super excited to be here to share this talk with you all. And today we're going to be talking about design with mental health in mind. This talk is going to be pretty high level initially as a bit of an introduction. And then we're going to dive into some more specific takeaways that we all can sort of, take away and apply right from the get-go. But before we get started, I figure I should probably tell you a little bit about me. So my name is Bradley, obviously, hey. I am currently a design lead at MetaLab. I'm half Egyptian, and this is probably the coolest picture of me that ever has or ever will exist. I now live in Cambridge with my partner and our dog Ellie. And this last picture is definitely one of my favorites. And it's the last project I ever did with COAS. And COAS was my own design studio, and together we focused pretty much exclusively on mental health and the mental health space. So I've been fortunate enough to work in this incredible space for sort of quite some time and give it a lot of thought and focus, but I do want to flag a couple of things. Firstly, I'm by no means an expert in mental health. And secondly, I kind of really want today to be like the start of a collaboration. I'm not here to give all the answers, but I would really love to contribute to the conversation. Before we go any further, I do want to just break apart how I think about the terms mental health and mental illness. They're often used as synonyms, but there are some pretty important differences. Mental health is something that we all have. Just like our physical health, our mental health can be nurtured and improved, or it can be neglected and tarnished. It's similar to our emotional health or mental well-being, and it really relates to our emotions, our thoughts, feelings, focus, social lives, and even how we deal with things like stress and pressure. Mental illness, on the other hand, is something that has a massive impact on our mental health, and it affects the way people think, feel, behave, interact with other people. Mental illness is a broad term that really refers to a wide range of conditions with varying impacts and manifestations of symptoms. It can include things like eating disorders, anxiety, or depression. Our mental health, similar to our physical health, really shouldn't be seen as a binary switch. For example, it's not healthy or unhealthy, but rather a spectrum that can move on a daily basis. And just as someone can have poor physical health without having a serious illness, you can have poor mental health without having a mental illness. And so with that in mind, when I say design for mental health, what I really mean is design for everyone. So just a couple weeks ago, I was talking to my friend Anna, and she made this really interesting point. Since the dawn of the information era, our society has really quantum leaped ahead. I mean, to put that in context, to see a relative on the other side of the globe, say 50, 60, 70 years ago, I would have to fly if I was really lucky. If I was a little bit less lucky, I'd have to take one long boat trip. But now I can just pick up my phone and FaceTime more or less anybody around the world. But when we compare that to evolutionary terms, the last 50, 60 years, we haven't moved an inch. And so, to that end, it's almost as if we're all trying to play a Blu-ray DVD in a Betamax. There's something there that's not quite connected. And that's not to say that technology is bad for us, right? I mean, of course not. It's incredible. The way I'm able to give this talk from, again, a completely different country is a testament to that. And it really has opened up so much opportunity for the world. However, I believe the way in which we will interact with technology has kind of been flawed right from the outset. And to understand why, we really have to look at the industry as a whole. And it was announced just a few years back that the World Health Organization is going to include gaming disorder, or the inability to stop gaming, into the International Classification of Diseases. And this is just one part of a growing recognition of the problem, but many people still aren't aware of exactly how products make use of experiences, mechanisms, and prompts to keep us hooked, or some of the dangers that come with it. And of course, I imagine that sort of folks here today are no stranger to digital products or the way that the way that they work. I mean, after all, building them is kind of what a lot of us do. Just to level set though, I wanted to share some of the top kind of digital hooks that are most often used. Things like creating scarcity, so inducing this severe sense of FOMO or fear of missing out. Social proof, so, you know, if 200,000 people retweeted that, oh, I should probably take a look too. I don't want to, you know, miss out. Again, links back up to the FOMO. And personalization. Algorithms are always going to bring the most relevant content to the top, because that's what creates the best experience, but it's also what makes it hard to step away. And it is nearly always done with the best intentions, creating the best experience possible. But when you make an experience too good, that is also what makes it harder to step away from the product, and where things like addiction may really start to form. And now, none of these things are inherently bad, just as nobody could argue that chocolate is inherently bad. The problem, just like with chocolate though, really lies in overconsumption. And the journalist Johann Hari has a great quote about just this in his book Lost Connections, where he likens our online presence to taking cocaine. You see, apps aren't really introducing anything new, but what they do is bring native human desires into an intensified and easily accessible format. A way to think about it is almost like having a small child. My youngest brother, Oscar, just turned 7, and this is a picture of us from a few years back. But whenever I visit him, he'll do his best to capture and maintain my attention. And if my focus switches for kind of even a minute, he's dragging me off to play Pokemon, or take him to the park, or throwing a pillow at my head. But it's manageable, and I really enjoy the time I spend with him. Us spending that quality time together, we're both getting real value and growth from that. But if we were to introduce into the equation, say, 20 of him, all fighting for my attention at once, suddenly it becomes a little bit trickier. Not only is the situation harder to manage, I'm dodging more pillows, but I'm getting less and less value from it. With more pulls for my attention, I'm spending less time focused on the activity, more time in a reactive state, and all of this is generating more and more anxiety. And although it may not feel as extreme as 27-year-olds, that is very similar to the situation that we're often faced with tech. The reality is, many of us are being pulled for attention in a similar way on a daily basis. And very often, we might not even realize it. But we are starting to see change. We've become more and more aware of the dangers of addictive technology, especially as the digital native generation is growing up. And it's starting to enter the conversation more and more. We're seeing even big companies beginning to make significant changes. And we talk a lot about empathy as designers, and this is one place where it can really come in strong. Advocating for a more mindful approach to product development within our companies is absolutely something we can and should be doing. I don't want to turn this into a lecture though, so I'm going to jump into some of the things that we can do immediately really to start to build towards this. These points are applicable to almost every product, and I've built them out of where we saw the biggest pitfalls and where the things I've sort of come across over the years, but there are a million more that are going to be industry or area specific. So this first point is going to be about being transparent, comprehensible, and clear with your intentions. Recently, we've seen some pretty big changes within transparency in tech. For a long time, products would almost act like a black box. You plug in your info and out pop the experience. Magic, right? It's something that's great for adoption, reducing friction, following the whole don't make me think kind of principle, but helping people understand how a system really works is vital in empowering them to make decisions on how they want to use it. Being transparent with your product, with how your product uses input, enhances a feeling of safety and comfort while reducing stress and anxiety. And this is especially important when things may be different than we expect, or maybe more importantly than what people assume is true. Let's look at the Amazon Echo, for example. For the majority of us, the idea that humans may be reviewing snippets from Alexa's audio is fairly intuitive. For the voice recognition and AI to get better, we need humans to transcribe input and train algorithms, right? Well, what's intuitive for us working in tech and what's intuitive for the people who are engaging with our products are oftentimes two entirely different things. And we've seen this over and over in big tech, where we're not being intentionally deceitful, but we're also not being explicitly transparent, which leads to headlines like these. So what can we do to be more transparent and build more trust? And the first thing really is to offer control. So the Alexa app now lets you see a log of all of the recordings it has ever taken. And what's even better is it lets you delete them. Transparency and control are really the two cornerstones of trust when it does come to new technology. And it's not enough to be transparent in legalese, grey on grey text, or in the small print. We need to make sure that we're making that effort to make our products and systems truly comprehensible. You see, generally speaking, people have the right to understand what your product is doing and why it's doing it. And if for any reason you're uncomfortable with exposing either of those things, then it's possible that there may be some larger questions that should be being asked there. Taking the time and effort to make sure your system is not only transparent, but also understandable at that human level will pay dividends in the future, while the consequences of not doing so could prove to be incredibly costly. Not only could it create mistrust in your product, but it could generate a huge amount of anxiety for the people engaging with your experiences. The next point is going to be value people's time. And this sounds so simple, right? But it's something that products so often ignore. Valuing people's time can come in many shapes and sizes, but ultimately, it comes down to understanding where your product fits within their lives and optimizing for that specific portion. And in the age of, push notifications and endless scrolling, this is probably the one that is maybe hardest to accept and implement, but it is something we really need to look at if we ever want to change the way we interact with digital experiences. One of my favorite examples of this is Instagram's All Caught Up feature. Instagram is an incredibly powerful platform. It's engaging, it's lightweight, it's seamless, and very well designed. If you combine this with the endless scroll nature of social media, you could quite easily have people sinking a ton of time into the platform without even realizing it. Instagram, however, have introduced this all caught up feature. This is a small feed item that appears and notifies you once you've seen everything new in the last 2 days. And we see it happening more and more. Things like Apple's screen time, YouTube's take a break, and Facebook, your time on Facebook, are all taking this similar approach. And one of the reasons that these features work so well is that they're not judgmental. They don't encourage or condemn spending time on your device. Instead, they just give you that little nudge. They help you become more aware of the time you are spending versus how much time you maybe wanted to spend, so that you can make these intentional decisions around your digital habits. And that's really where the idea of ethics and accountability comes in for me. No products are making them do this, right? This is something that they've recognized is a real value add. And for the products that do really add value to people's lives, or that are functional, we should be looking to exist within our quadrant and making it a really great quadrant. People should return to the product because they find genuine value in it, not because we've gotten them hooked or addicted in some way. And absolutely, we could hide behind those great metrics and engagement, but if they aren't directly tied to the value that the product brings people, really, what's the point? We're just kidding ourselves. Instead, we should be looking to empower people to use tech in a way that serves them, and not the other way around. So when we do approach product metrics, I would really push for us to consider replacing the standard sort of off-the-shelf go-to engagement and daily active people with a goal that ties directly to the value we provide. Now, this one's really fun, surprisingly. It's to start disaster forecasting. Basically, the idea here is taking the product, feature, or concept or idea that you're working on and kind of imagine the worst possible way it could ever be used. And the idea here is, if we plan for the absolute worst and make sure that's covered, we're in a pretty good place. And one exercise that I always love to run for this is the Black Mirror brainstorm. I used to run this a fair bit with clients at Cause, and in my last role at sort of Facebook with the non-integrity product teams who tended not to have this stuff top of mind. And for anybody who's not familiar with the show Black Mirror, it's kind of like painting a picture of a dystopian future and sort of things going very, very wrong in some way. And so I find this one the most useful for consumer-facing products, but it can absolutely be adapted for business-facing products as well. And also, you should feel free to kind of have fun with it and customize it as much as you like. But at its core, it's pretty simple. We're going to create a virtual space. We're going to stick up kind of our core features or our experiences, anything that we really want to use this time to brainstorm and sort of dive into. And then also have our markets, or sort of the people that are using the product, the personas, if you will, pinned up as well for reference for the whole team to sort of look at the two together. And virtually, you can use things like Miro for this. If you're in person, then whiteboards are also amazing. Then it really comes down to asking pretty much kind of just one core question here. And I've always liked this framing of, how might our product cause harm to? Because it kind of puts a bit of like a very different spin on maybe the traditional questions that we ask within product design, and really gets us in the right headspace. And just some of the groups and sort of populations that you might want to consider within this exercise might be more vulnerable groups, people that have lower tech literacy, children, but it can also span outside of just sort of individual groups and start to look at areas in a whole. So things like equality. How could our product cause harm to democracy? These are often very big and sort of sometimes scary questions to ask, but they are critical that we think about them and have them in our minds as we're building. And so what I usually recommend is taking 15, maybe 30 minutes as a group to start to drop sticky notes down as to how this product could potentially cause harm to these different groups. And I'll flag that there may be maybe some of the examples here aren't going to be relevant depending on your product, and there may also be really relevant ones that haven't been listed here. Consider this just like a starting point. After your 15 or 30 minutes, it's always good to do a bit of a share back. And then I would recommend grouping your stickies in a 4x4 grid of risk vector, so from low to high, and impact from low to high. So risk is going to be how likely this thing is to happen. Do we feel like this is completely dystopian Black Mirror, or do we feel like actually this could be something that could happen tomorrow if we launched right now? And then impact, low to high. Is the impact somebody is a little bit annoyed, or is the impact generating a severe amount of anxiety for somebody? What do we think the scale could be there? Take some time as a group, again, to kind of sort them accordingly within this grid. And anything that ends up as being low risk, and these are maybe the more dystopian ideas that came out of the exercise, can generally be saved as hey, this is something that could happen in the future. We want to hold on to this and capture it. Anything that's not completely dystopian and starts to come into, hey, this could happen today or in the next year or 5 years, these are where the things need to basically start to be discussed and addressed. Anything, for example, that's high risk and high impact should absolutely be taken care of before the product even launches. Anything that's, high risk and low impact is maybe something that we want to follow up on, but potentially isn't launch blocking if the impact isn't that huge or detrimental. Really, it's hard for me to give a perfect overview and example of this exercise without running it individually within each of your teams. What I would recommend doing is taking this as kind of the bare bones structure, taking it away and adapting it to work with your product and your team and your scenario. Ultimately, the idea here is just trying to understand where could things go wrong before they do, so that we can build and protect against them. We tend to be a pretty cheerful bunch as designers and product people, and we love to look at the happy paths. But we should really make sure we're considering that full spectrum of experiences that somebody could face so that we can protect, support, and empower. So to recap, the 3 points and kind of takeaways here are to be transparent and clear, to value people's time, and to start considering what could go wrong before it does. You see, designing for mental health at its core isn't really anything all that special. I like to think about it as dismantling some of the dark practices that the industry has built up as norms. It's about considering that the person behind the screen lives an entire life away from your product and respecting that small segment that they've allowed you access to. But most of all, it really is just about being human. The product decisions that we make today could have impacts that ripple well into the future. And so it's really about putting those people at the top of our minds and making decisions that we know we can be proud of. And if there is one more last thing I'd love for you all to take away, it would be my Twitter handle. It's where I'm most active, and I would really love for this to be the start of a conversation and collaboration between all of us as designers, because that really is the only way we're going to see this change at scale. I kept this share intentionally high level and included actionable takeaways to make sure that everybody is able to benefit from this right from the get-go, but it does go so much deeper. When I say design with mental health in mind, it's the same thing as saying ethical design, or, as I mentioned at the start, truly designing for everyone. If you're interested in diving deeper, I'm going to be sharing more materials on all of the above topics in the near future. Again, probably Twitter is going to be the best place to catch updates on that. Finally, I just wanted to say such a big thank you for inviting me here to share these thoughts with you all today. I hope you really enjoy the rest of the program as well. There are some truly fantastic speakers lined up. Yeah, that's all from me. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, friends, and I look forward to speaking with you all very soon. Thank you.
First of all, let me send a big thank you to Bradley for his amazing talk and for being so kind to record it for us. Unfortunately, we cannot have a Q&A session today, but if you have any questions, I'm sure he would love to discuss it with you on Twitter. So be sure to reach out and maybe use the hashtag WUDMilan.